If you're here, it means something in you is shifting, maybe quietly, maybe tenderly, maybe without words. You've decided to begin again. And now you're standing at the starting line, wondering how to move forward without turning this new beginning into another source of pressure. Because for so many of us, fresh starts don't feel peaceful, they feel heavy. Heavy with expectations, heavy with fear, heavy with the thought, I can't mess this up again. So today, I want to talk about starting fresh without pressure, without perfection, and without rushing yourself into the same cycles that exhausted you before. This is about learning how to move forward without abandoning yourself in the process. So let's discuss why new beginning trigger pressure. There's something about starting over that activates old wounds. We tell ourselves, this time has to be different. This time I need to do it right. This time I can't fall behind. And suddenly, a new beginning doesn't feel like freedom, it feels like a test of discipline, a test of worthiness, a test of whether or not you finally learned your lesson. But a fresh start was never meant to be a test. It was meant to be a return, a recalibration, a moment of honesty with yourself. If you feel pressure right now, it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you care. And caring doesn't need to be punished. You care about your life. You care about your future. You care about not repeating the same pain again. And somewhere along the way, you learned that caring had to hurt. That if you really wanted something, you had to suffer for it. That if you really cared deeply, you had to create urgency, anxiety, and self-criticism as proof. You learned that pressure was the price of wanting more. But caring is not a flaw that needs correcting. It's not a weakness that needs discipline, and it's definitely not something that needs to be punished. Pressure often shows up when you've been disappointed before, when you've tried and fallen short, when you're afraid of hoping again and being let down. So you grip tighter, you rush, you demand more from yourself than you would from anyone else. Not because you're broken, but because you're protecting what matters to you. Let me tell you a truth about protection. Protection doesn't need to be harsh to be effective. Think about it. If someone you love was starting over, you wouldn't scream at them to hurry. You wouldn't tell them that they have one chance to get it right. You wouldn't withhold compassion until they prove themselves. No, you wouldn't do that. You would move closer. You would soften your voice. You would say, take your time. I'm here. You yourself deserve that same care. Discipline doesn't have to sound like punishment. Motivation doesn't have to be fueled by fear. Growth doesn't require self abandonment. Caring can be gentle, it can be patient, it can be rooted in trust instead of urgency. So, if you feel pressure, don't shame yourself for it. Don't try to crush it or outrun it. Listen to it. Pressure is often a signal that something inside you matters deeply. And what matters deserves protection, not punishment. You don't need to prove how much you care by suffering. You're allowed to care and still move with grace. You're allowed to want more without turning that desire into a weapon against yourself. Let's go a bit deeper into how pressure disguises itself as motivation. That's a big one. Pressure often sounds productive. It says, don't waste time, stay focused, push harder, push, push, push. But underneath that voice is usually fear, fear of falling behind again, fear of being judged, fear of confirming your worst thoughts about yourself. And when fear leads the way, even good intentions turn into burnout. Pressure might get you started, but it won't sustain you. Only peace can do that. Only peace can sustain you. This is why, in the context of this video, I encourage you not to rush. But what does no rush really means? Let's talk about it. When I say no rush, I'm not saying stop caring. I'm not saying give up. I'm not saying move slowly, just to move slowly. Come closer, bestie, and hear my words clearly and intentionally. No rush means you stop letting anxiety set the pace. No rush means you stop treating your life like a deadline. No rush means you allow growth to unfold instead of forcing it, because rushing doesn't create momentum, it creates instability. And guess what? Starting fresh isn't about building something you don't have to escape from later. You don't need to prove to anyone that this time is different, not even to yourself. A lot of people come from the need to prove something to yourself, to others, to the past. But you don't need to prove that this time is different. I know it's different because you yourself, you know it's different. It's different because you're different. You're more aware, more honest, more attuned to your limits. And awareness is more powerful than intensity. You don't need to announce your growth. You don't need to justify your peace. You don't need to explain why you're moving the way you are. Quiet growth is still growth. Now, this leads us to the myth of the perfect start. So many people delay starting fresh because they're waiting for the perfect beginning, perfect energy, perfect plan, perfect timing. But perfection isn't preparation, it's fear disguised as protection. Protection from disappointment, protection from judgment, protection from feeling foolish if things don't work out. But the truth is, no meaningful thing ever starts perfectly. It starts honestly. Start now as perfect as you are, as imperfect as it, whatever you're trying to do, is. Your new beginning is here. Just start. And guess what? A messy start is more powerful than a perfect start because a perfect start is often an illusion. It's usually rehearsed, controlled, and rooted in fear, fear of failing, fear of being judged, fear of getting it wrong again. But a messy start, a messy start is honest. It's not trying to impress anyone. It's not waiting until everything feels safe or certain. It's movement without guarantees. And that takes courage. Bestie, honey, come here. Listen to me. Hear my words clearly and intentionally. Messy starts still count. Slow starts still count. Uneven starts still count. Starting fresh doesn't mean you won't hesitate. It doesn't mean you don't doubt yourself. It doesn't mean you won't ever pause, adjust, or even restart. That's not failure, that's responsiveness. A messy start means you're paying attention. You're checking in with your body, you're noticing when things doesn't align, you're willing to course correct instead of forcing yourself forward just to say you started. That, my friend, is wisdom. Perfection moves in a straight line, but real life does not. Real life requires flexibility. It requires listening. It requires humility to say, this needs to look a little different than I imagined. A messy start means you're not overriding yourself. You're not silencing your intuition here. You're not sacrificing your well being just to maintain momentum. You're moving in relationship with yourself. And that kind of beginning builds trust, trust with your body, trust with your intuition, trust with the process, trust with God. Perfect starts are rigid. Messy starts are alive. Perfect starts break when something goes wrong. Messy starts adapt. The ability to adapt will carry you further than perfection ever could. So, if your start feels awkward, if it feels slow, if it feels unclear, that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're doing it honestly. And honesty is a far stronger foundation than perfection ever will be. Here's another thing you need to know. Starting fresh doesn't require speed. So let's release this belief together. Starting fresh does not require speed. We've been conditioned to believe that fast means focus, that fast means serious, that fast means committed. But fast is not the same thing as faithful. Fast is not the same thing as being alive. And guess what? Fast is definitely not the same thing as being sustainable. Believe it or not, fast often means anxious. Fast often means afraid to fall behind. Fast often means you're moving to escape discomfort because the direction is off. And when speed is driven by fear, eventually it costs you something big. Your peace, your clarity, your body, your joy. Some of the most meaningful growth happens slowly, not because you're unmotivated, not because you're unsure, but because you're being intentional. So, growth allows you to listen, it allows you to adjust before something breaks, it allows you to notice when something feels off, instead of pushing through at all costs. Slowness creates space for discernment, and discernment is what keeps you from rebuilding the same life with a different name. With pauses, you learn to stop. With rest, you learn how to continue. With room to adjust, you build something that doesn't collapse the first time life gets hard. Speed gives the illusion of progress, but alignment gives longevity. You're not behind because you're moving carefully. You're not late because you're taking your time. You're not falling because you're being thoughtful. You're building something that can last. Something that will require to burn yourself to keep it alive. Something that can grow with you instead of consuming you. And that kind of beginning, it's not weakness, it's wise. Sometimes with starting again comes comparison, and comparison almost always creates false urgency. Urgency that doesn't come from alignment, all right? It's urgency that doesn't come from clarity, urgency that comes from fear. Fear that you're late, fear that you're behind, fear that everyone else does something that you don't. One of the quickest ways to lose your peace is to measure your beginning against someone else's middle. You see people launching, producing, moving quickly, and suddenly your pace feels wrong. You start questioning yourself, second guessing your instincts, wondering if you should be doing more, moving faster, skipping steps. But here's what comparison never shows you. You don't know what they skipped. You don't know what they rushed through. You don't know what they're suppressing just to keep momentum. You don't know what parts of themselves they had to ignore to move that fast. You don't know what cracks are forming underneath the surface. You don't know what they'll have to return to later in order to heal. Speed often borrows from the future. It looks impressive now, but guess what? It always collects interest. And for many people, that price is paid in interest, in burnout, resentment, and collapse. Your pace is not a problem. Your pace is information. It's telling you what your nervous system can handle. It's telling you what season you're in. It's telling you what needs care instead of pressure. When you ignore your pace to match someone else's, you abandon yourself. And abandoning yourself will never lead to the life you actually want. Your beginning again doesn't need to look like anyone else's. Your timing doesn't need to make sense to anyone watching. Your path, your unique path, it doesn't need to be validated by speed. Comparison tells you to rush. Wisdom tells you to listen. And when you listen, you build something rooted in truth, not reaction. So, the next time comparison creates urgency, pause. Ask yourself, what is my pace trying to teach me right now? Because guess what? Your pace isn't slowing you down, it's guiding you home. Starting fresh can look very quiet, and that can feel uncomfortable, especially in a world that celebrates noise, speed, and constant output. We're taught that growth should be visible, that progress should be obvious, that if you're really starting fresh, people should be able to see it. But some of the most important beginnings happen when no one is watching. Sometimes starting fresh doesn't look like action, it looks like restraint. It looks like not responding right away. It looks like not saying yes just to prove you're capable. It looks like choosing rest instead of pushing through. Guess what? That takes more strength than people realize. Saying no when you're used to overgiving, resting without guilt when you're used to earning your worth, letting yourself take up steps and stop when you're used to rushing to the next thing, that's not quitting. That's recalibration. Sometimes starting fresh looks like doing less because doing more was never the answer. Doing more didn't bring you peace. Doing more didn't bring you clarity. Doing more didn't bring you fulfillment. So now you're choosing differently. Quiet beginnings often mean you're listening more than performing. They mean you're paying attention to your body. They mean you're honoring your limits instead of overriding them. Limits are not weakness, they are wisdom. Because restraint means you trust yourself enough to know that not everything needs an immediate response. Not every opportunity is aligned. Not every open door is meant to be walked through. Starting fresh can mean protecting your energy instead of spending it all at once. It means choosing presence over productivity, alignment over applause, depth over fear. It may not look impressive on the outside, but it changes everything on the inside. Quiet beginnings are often the most sustainable ones. They don't burn bright and burn out. They grow slow, steadily, intentionally. So, if your fresh starts feel stubble, if it feels calm instead of exciting, if it feels grounded instead of rushed, that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means you're doing it wisely. Wisdom will carry you farther than force ever could. You're allowed to build without burning out. Bestie, hear me clearly and intentionally. You are allowed to build a life, a dream, a future that does not cost you your nervous system. You are allowed to succeed without suffering. You are allowed to grow without grinding yourself down. You are allowed to rest and still be worthy. This isn't a modern idea. This isn't self care culture. This isn't an excuse to avoid responsibility. This is ancient wisdom. Even God rested. The same God who created the heavens and the earth, the same God who spoke worlds into existence, the same God who had unlimited power and authority, he rested on the seventh day. Not because he was tired, not because he ran out of strength, but because rest was part of the divine design. Rest is not an afterthought, it's not a reward, it's not something you earn after everything is finished. Rest was built into creation itself, which tells us something really important, right? Because rest is not a sign of weakness, rest is a sign of alignment. If God Himself modeled rest, who told you that you had to run yourself in the ground to be worthy? Who taught you that exhaustion was proof of commitment? Who convinced you that burnout was the price of success? Because let me tell you, that voice is not the truth, honey. And it is definitely not divine. You were never meant to build your life in survival mode. You were never meant to sacrifice your body, your peace, your mental health just to prove that you care. You don't honor God by destroying yourself. You honor God by stewarding the life He gave you. That means listening when your body says slow down. That means pausing when your spirit feels heavy. It means trusting that rest is not delaying your destiny, it's preparing you for it. You don't have to bleed for your dreams. You don't have to suffer to be chosen. You don't have to exhaust yourself to be valuable. You are already worthy. Worth doesn't remove your worth, it reveals that you understand it. Starting fresh doesn't mean sacrificing yourself again, it means choosing differently. It means building from a place of wholeness, not depletion, from trust, not fear, from faith, not panic. And when you build that way, what you create will collapse under its own weight because it was built from wisdom, with care, with rest woven into the foundation. And that kind of life is not just successful, it's sustainable. So instead of asking, how fast should I move? Ask instead, how do I want this to feel? Instead of asking, what should I be accomplishing by now? Ask yourself, what allows me to stay present and grounded? Those questions lead to sustainable growth. If you're starting fresh right now, I want you to breathe. So let's do it. Let's take a breath. Do another one. There is no rush. There is no finish line chasing you. There is no version of you that needs to arrive before you're allowed to begin. You are already enough to start. So let this fresh start be gentle. No pressure, no perfection, no rush. Just intention, just honesty, just one step at a time. You're not falling behind, you're finding your rhythm. And that rhythm will carry you farther than urgency ever could. I'm proud of you for choosing a softer way forward. I love you, and I'll see you in the next video.